to video 2 in the low maintenance openings Torre attack series. I'm your host, International Master Andrew Martin, and I'm advocating that the Torre attack is a very good opening for the average player to adopt. It's an opening which will give you good positions with the minimum possible study, and that's exactly what I think most players who have busy lives these days need if they want to improve their results and at the same time play good and satisfying chess. Now, just in case you didn't catch up on video 1, I'm going to summarise at the beginning what I think the advantages are of playing the Torre attack. Firstly, White gets easy rapid development for all of his pieces. He gets a very solid position in all lines coming out of the opening, going into the early middle game. He inherits positions which furnish late opening and early middle game plans which are simple enough to understand and execute. He will get a high percentage of quick wins at club level when Black doesn't know how to react to White's standard plans. White gets a very rock solid pawn formation, and I think all these advantages come together to make the Torre attack a very viable prospect. One thing I would say is that despite the slightly formulaic nature of the Torre attack, one should avoid routine play in all cases. Routine play is the enemy of the average player. If you just play automatic moves without really thinking about them, more or less the mindset is something like, oh, this has to be right, I've played it many times before. But, you have to keep alert in every position. You can't underestimate the enemy, and you've got to watch out for subtle little changes in the position, even in an opening like the Torre attack. Now, what we're going to do on this second video is to look at games at a slightly higher level to see how the Torre operates at Grandmaster level. Yes, Grandmasters do play this opening from time to time, and in general, White scores very well with it. I know from my own perspective that playing Black against Queenspawn openings such as the Torre attack is intensely frustrating because White sets up such a solid pawn formation, and it's so difficult to break this pawn formation down that you feel like you're battering your head against a brick wall. And the absence of counterplay is a very difficult situation for any type of player to handle, especially Grandmasters and Masters who depend on counterplay in their games to help them win. So our first game, anyway, is from the Western States Open in 2003, playing Whitey's Ricardo de Guzman, who's graded 25-39, and playing Black is the many-time US champion and Grandmaster Nick de Fermium, who's a bit of a theoretical boffin. So to play the Torre attack against him is quite a good idea, but because there are very few theoretical surprises that Black can spring on White in this most solid of openings. Well, no surprise that de Fermium plays h6. This is regarded as one of Black's most reliable counters. On video 1 we saw White play bishop h4, but I think the critical move is the one that de Guzman played here. Bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, and now we get a situation where we've transposed to a variation of Trompovsky, where White usually plays e4, but in this particular game, de Guzman plays knight bd2, which was an original idea of Rafael Vaganyan, as we'll see in the next game, and which I think is an interesting way of meeting this variation. I can certainly recommend it to you. Most players who play this line with Black are expecting e4, even at club level, whereas knight bd2 takes them into something slightly unusual. Obviously, Black can continue to invite White to play e4 by playing non-committal moves such as d6 and knight d7. But White's idea in this position is to play g3, to station his bishop on the long diagonal, and then to gently probe Black's position. This is not a line where White tries to smash Black up. It certainly can't be achieved. It's a line where White puts a brick wall in front of this bishop on f8. Black would very much like to light the position up at some point for his bishop on f8, because that's the piece white doesn't have, the light square bishop. And so white erects this this pawn formation at the outset, which, you know, prevents black from doing that. And what we get in this game is a rather typical typical encounter in this line, where black strives to get the dark square bishop going from an early stage, doesn't really do so, and white ends up with a small edge out of the opening, a small nagging edge. Now a4. Alright, well, white has developed logically, and now he starts to probe the black queen side with a4. Again, it's a very logical move. We can just imagine this pawn coming all the way up to a6 to pressurise the pawn at b7, and of course pressure like this marries in very well with the bishop on g2. So black's first task is to deal with white's pressure on the queen side. Well, as with all good players, the Fermian sees no direct threat, and therefore drops his queen out of the way of the bishop to a slightly safer square, and now the bishop on g7 starts to play. White continues to probe with the a pawn, and black plays rook b8. I think it would be unwise for black to allow a6 whilst his rook is on a8. So I suppose the other choice, of course, was to play a6 himself. Of course, when you're defending against an enemy pawn advance, the usual advice is to stay back, to avoid pawn advances on that same flank, because it's kind of like making it easy for the opponent to leave the game open. You know, you can just imagine black having played a6 to go b4, b5 at the right moment and leave it open the queen side, where white is better. So de Fermian understands this perfectly, of course, being a very strong grandmaster, and makes as few concessions as possible with the move rook b8. So white proceeds with e4, and black plays e5. Again, very typical play, and now white brings his rook to e1. Black plays rook e8, and white plays queen c2. Knight comes to f8, and white brings his knight up to c4. So no way can we say that white is clearly better out of the opening. But what he does have is a small advantage, I think, based on slightly more space. The knights are probably better pieces than the bishops in this position, because the position is closed to a certain degree, and I think that's about it. I think it also is the absence of black's counterplay in this position that makes this position an unattractive prospect. Black has got to be extremely patient in a position of this type, opening up the game for this bishop. You know, and with the white pieces all in such good positions. Well, stylistically, I just don't like black. But of course, many strong players would be happy to take black because of the potential of the two bishops. Nevertheless, here, white is without doubt a little bit better. And he fixes the pawn formation in the centre, which again, I think favours knights. In general, the last thing you want when you've got a bishop is that the bishop looks at the central pawn. This is the situation that black has here. And, well, as I say, it's patience all the way for black as he gradually opens up the game for that dark square bishop. But white still has more space. So knight e3, an excellent square for the knight, radiating power, and, you know, it's possible that knight d5 might be useful one day. Bishop d7. Well, again, obviously black could see the two bishops with bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, and then play a move like c6. But again, you have to say that white is a bit better here. Probably white starts with bishop e2, puts the bishop up on c4, and well, white's bishop is just much better than black's. It's only a very small edge, but it is something. So de Fermian retreats his bishop. h4, hoping to play h5 and gain the f5 square should black play g5 in response. So de Fermian plays h5, and now white plays bishop f1, c6 to stop knight d5, and now bishop c4. So de Guzman is playing very thematically in this game and maintaining his small edge. Bishop h6, good move by de Fermian, I think the bishop was doing nothing on g7. So he improves the position of that piece. And white plays king g2. Rook e d8. Well, certainly if I was black here, I would consider bishop takes e3. Rook takes e3. And now maybe a move like rook e d8 again. White is still a bit better, but I don't know. I think this would have been black's best chance. I guess he doesn't go for this once again because of the complete absence of counterplay and perhaps the potential weakness of f7 in this position. You know, white has ideas such as knight g5, rook f3, queen b3, or knight g5, rook comes across to f1, and then f4. White has more prospects for active play. I guess that's why he doesn't do it. In general, grandmasters avoid positions where they don't have any counterplay, like the plate, because you know they do find these positions extremely difficult to handle. Whereas a club player might go for that variation and just sit it out. Grandmasters are loath to do that, particularly ones with an active style like the Fermion. So rook e d8 was played, and now white took away some squares with b4. King g7, rook a d1, and now f6. Obviously, black was well aware of white's potential pressure against f7, so he's done all he could to nullify that pressure. However, as we'll see from the continuation of this game, f6 is in a higher sense the losing move because it does weaken black's kingside to a degree, although that's not easy to perceive at this point. Knight h2. Okay, black plays knight e6, and white plays king g1. Typical play in a position of this type. White doesn't see any special way to make a breakthrough here, so he manoeuvres, he waits, and he doesn't weaken his position. White's still got this slight edge, and well, I wouldn't say he's torturing black here, but you know, he's emphasising his control of the position. However, black's position is by no means lost, and the Fermion continues to manoeuvre. Alright, rook takes d8. Rook takes d8. Rook d1. King f8. Rook takes d8. Queen takes d8. And now queen to e2. Not an especially interesting position, you might think, but wait and see what happens. There's a little bit of toing and froing now with the queens. Black plays queen e7. White plays queen d3. Black plays queen d7. White plays queen e2. It's almost as if white is offering a draw here. And the Fermion says he's not interested with queen d6. I mean, just going back to the position after queen e7. I mean, white doesn't have to play for a draw in this position at all. For instance, one start he could make is just retreating the bishop to b3, putting the knight on c4, and bringing the other knight up to e3. There are various ways to manoeuvre in this position to continue the game. But, okay, well, the game continued queen to d6. Bishop came back to b3 anyway. Bishop comes to d7. And now the instant that bishop comes to d7, de Guzman is onto the mistake like a shot. This manoeuvring in a slightly better position has been, you know, carried out to a fine art in this game. To lull de Fermion into a false sense of security is by no means an easy trick because the guy is incredibly experienced. But actually, de Guzman managed it here. And now white strikes with a very surprising move, knight f5. It's a move that's completely unexpected in this position because, you know, you actually don't think that with either colour there's a great deal going on. You see queen c4 is going to be answered comfortably with bishop e6. You see that knight c4 can also be comfortably answered by, for instance, queen e7 and then bishop e6 next to eliminate the powerful knight. But for some reason, you know, you just don't see knight f5. And that is a very strong move. Black must take it. Obviously, if he takes with the pawn, queen takes h5, sets up the double threat of mate, and queen takes h6, which is a sudden and very strange disaster for black. So he's got to take, And now after e takes f5, we see that the move f6 hasn't turned out very well after all, because black's king side is now very weak. Compare the bishops. They look equal in strength, but the fact is the bishop on h6 is shooting down an empty diagonal, whereas white's bishop is now incredibly powerful, and there is a really dangerous threat of queen c4, which black has to deal with. I mean, it may well be in this position that black is completely lost. He plays king g7 in order to answer queen c4 with perhaps knight d5 or even queen f8. But king g7 can't really assist the black cause. And after f takes g6, king takes g6, bishop d1, black is in desperate trouble. He can't defend h5, and when the h5 pawn goes, his whole king position is going to be wide open. And so it transpires. King g7, queen takes h5, that's a very important pawn. The knight comes to d5, but white is able to work here with mating threats, and this is the problem. Black still is being denied counterplay. Bishop comes to b3. This really is an incredibly difficult position for de Fermian. In fact, actually, coming up to the time of control, black decided to resign this position. He's got no counterplay, and there's really nothing to do. So that was an extremely good game by de Guzman in many ways. I mean, perhaps white was lucky to a degree in that he managed to strike with knight f5 at the right moment. But it was certainly uncomfortable for black all the way through. So the plan with knight bd2 in the opening, fianchettoing the king bishop and then a4, a5, is a very viable one. And we'll now go on to looking at another example from a Grandmaster tournament of the same idea.